From MTN News, this is Montana This Morning.
Magic City moose on the loose.
It was so beautiful. It was absolutely stunning.
Plus, small town Montana is getting a recharge.
Easy off, easy on, whereas in your larger cities, it's a little more difficult.
And we'll have the traffic update that could impact your morning commute. And good morning and welcome to Montana This Morning on this Tuesday, October 11th. And welcome as well to our Great Falls viewers this morning. Happening today, President Biden and other G7 leaders are holding an emergency meeting to discuss Russia's escalation in Ukraine. New Russian airstrikes hit heavily populated cities, killing 14 people. CBS's Astrid Martinez brings us the latest.
President Biden and other G7 leaders will hold an emergency virtual meeting this morning to discuss support for Ukraine and ways to hold Russian President Vladimir Putin accountable. It comes one day after more than 80 Russian missiles rained down on more than a dozen regions of Ukraine. Ukrainian officials say more than 10 energy infrastructure targets were hit, leaving many without power, water, and heat.
The entire world has once again seen the true face of the terrorist state that kills our people.
Putin has claimed the strikes were in retaliation for the destruction of a vital bridge that connects Russia to Crimea over the weekend.
Russia is a terrorist state.
The latest attacks set off pro-Ukraine demonstrations around the globe. From Sydney, Australia, to Bucharest, Romania, outside the Ukrainian embassy, to Washington, D.C., where demonstrators projected messages onto the Russian embassy while singing at the gates. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky will address the G7 leaders at the top of today's emergency meeting. Astrid Martinez, CBS News, New York.
And Ukraine's president says air defense is his #1 priority. All right, we're checking in on the weather. We've got Miller back today. Hey, good morning to you.
Well, hello, Andrea. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you've had a great couple of days.
Yes, you as well.
Yeah, I had to come back to work to take a break. My wife had me running over the last 4 days.
That's too funny. I like that you say that. That's pretty funny.
Well, I missed everybody, and as I come back, I bring rain this morning, but it's not going to last. As we get into this afternoon, we'll be seeing drier conditions, and we may have already hit our high in some spots this morning. How was our high yesterday? Well, good 15 degrees above the norm. We may be around average today. We're not going to get anywhere near that 77. Overnight low yesterday of 44. We're warmer than that this morning, though. Top gust yesterday near 30. No rain yesterday, of course, for the month. We're just under 4/10 of an inch, just over 13.5 inches or so for the year. So we started off on a soggy note for the month, and now we're starting to dry out there. Portions of Yellowstone County dry in terms of the drought, so we could use some more rainfall. And that's what we have this morning at the airport. We're at 54, so it has cooled down a bit. Humidity at 57%. You can see the winds. That's really going to be the big story the next couple of days behind that cold front. Some really strong winds, and we'll break that down coming up. Gust of 29 at the airport. We had one around 32 earlier this morning. 41 right now at Great Falls. Feels like 36. You've got some rain this morning. That will taper off as we go along this afternoon. And we have a really nice stretch of weather on the way coming up. So we'll break that down, and we'll let you know when our warmest day is going to be and if it's going to be warm across the weekend.
Yeah, already looking forward to the weekend. Is that too early on a Tuesday?
Never too early to think about the weekend.
That's what I thought. All right, Miller, thanks so much.
Okay.
All right, more electric vehicles hitting Montana roads, and this morning we're learning about the construction of new charging stations across the state. This one right here being built in the Billings Heights near Target. Last month, President Biden approved $900 million to install more stations across the nation. Montana getting up to 50 in the next 5 years. As Q2's Haley Monaco reports, many are heading to Montana's smallest communities.
A vast place like Montana may not seem like the most practical place to own an electric vehicle, but there are charging stations popping up all across the state, oftentimes in the most unlikely places, like right here in Custer, Montana.
With a population of just over 100 people, there may not be much to see in the small town of Custer, Montana. In fact, you can see from one end of town to the other. That's why this stands out like a sore thumb.
That particular charging station is actually one of the first that was installed in the state of Montana.
Brandon Whitman is the CEO of Yellowstone Valley Electric Cooperative. This charging station in Custer was the first they've put up and for years remains the only one they've installed.
We thought maybe because of that spot on the interstate it would be utilized.
And 135 miles down the road in Big Timber is a similar scene. Robin Parker is making a pit stop to charge his Tesla, one of the 5 stops he and his wife mapped out on their 670-mile drive from Spokane, Washington to Sheridan, Wyoming.
Easy off, easy on, whereas in your larger cities, sometimes it's a little more difficult.
Parker knows he's in the minority. Last year, electric vehicle registrations accounted for only 0.1% of all vehicle registrations in Montana. But demand for electric vehicles is growing.
They usually all sell before they land at the dealerships.
Blake Underreiner says the demand is growing so much so that if you were to order an electric vehicle today, it would take about 3 to 6 months to arrive. And the charging infrastructure along interstates like I-90 reflect that demand.
Montana has tons of charging stations and are building more charging stations each and every day and month.
This is one of 91 stops across Montana with an electric charging station. Now, with the approval of President Biden's plan, you'll soon see many more with $900 million in funding flowing to states like Montana. The goal is to install 500,000 new chargers across the country, although Whitman says installing a rapid charging station is expensive.
Talking an investment over $150,000 just to put a rapid charger in.
It's an ambitious goal, but one that could bring more visitors to communities like this, so long as popularity for electric vehicles continues to grow. In Custer, Haley Monaco, MTN News.
All right, there's a changeup in leadership at the Elder Grove School District. Jim Goltz, who's the current principal at Bridger High, will now become the superintendent of Elder Grove. He was at Bridger for 8 years and active in high school football as the coach of one of the state's top 6-man football programs. As Bridger searches for someone new, Goltz is thanking the school for the memories, especially when he got to coach his 2 sons.
As a dad, it's pretty cool, and I've got to coach them when they were little and now into the high school.
Goltz will coach Bridger through the end of the season. This morning, we're learning more about the added mental toll that teens experience through the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, now research shows that kids who had their sports seasons canceled suffered significantly during that time. CBS's Nichelle Medina has more.
Begin. 1, 2.
Henry Weinpel is sharpening his blocking skills for the big game.
The physical aspect of it and the skill involved, it's all just really fun.
And he does not take his time on the field for granted. The 17-year-old, like many teens, took a big hit when the pandemic took down sports.
It was really disappointing. I couldn't spend time with my friends as much as I used to. It was really difficult to stay in physical shape.
I just had to keep encouraging him to focus on the future.
New research from the American Academy of Pediatrics conference shows when sports were sidelined, teen athletes reported high levels of anxiety and depression and low levels of physical activity and quality of life.
This study was really kind of against the backdrop of the existing mental health epidemic that we've been seeing in adolescents.
Thousands of teens nationwide filled out surveys in May 2020 after sports were canceled, and then 1 year later when sports returned.
Dramatic improvements in physical activity and quality of life, and considerable improvements in anxiety and depression. Unfortunately, we haven't quite gotten back to where we were before, and so continuing to prioritize mental health in adolescents and adolescent athletes is going to be a really important priority for years to come.
Henry is working harder than ever.
The pandemic really got me to realize how important sports were, and it makes me enjoy it that much more.
He comes home every day, drenched in dirt and sweat, and with a big smile on his face. And I say, how was practice? He said, it was awesome.
Happy to be back with his team, which remains undefeated. Nichelle Medina, CBS News, San Marcos, California.
Well, researchers are also seeing worsening mental health for teen athletes that weren't able to get back to sports since cancellations due to COVID. All right, happening this week, the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6th riot will hold its final hearing. Ahead of Thursday's hearing, a former Washington, D.C. police officer released secret recorded audio of his own from a meeting with House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. The audio from a mother of a D.C. officer who died of a stroke asks McCarthy why Trump didn't call off the mob. This morning, the deal to prevent a rail strike might now be in limbo. A union that represents track maintenance workers rejected a 5-year deal to provide a 24% pay increase along with bonuses. The union wants more paid leave and more paid sick time. All unions, 12 of them, need to approve the deal for the strike to be avoided. The maintenance union says it won't strike until after Congress returns in November to allow for more negotiations. There's new information on that cybersecurity attack at some of the country's largest airports. Well, now investigators are trying to confirm who's responsible. The attacks jammed websites using artificial users to create long wait times and congestion. Many of the websites were back up and running by last night, and officials say passengers aren't at risk. Now, the Department of Homeland Security says it is investigating. We do want to let you know about some road construction that's going to probably affect your morning commute. If you do take 27th Street, that westbound exit ramp will be closed for the next 2 weeks. That's because crews are building a connection from the interstate. So day and night work is planned. This particular ramp, it's especially busy this time of year because of the sugar beet factory just off 27th Street. Many farmers are using it to bring their harvest to the plant. This morning, you are not going to want to miss this in case you didn't see it already. That moose roaming around in the heart of Billings. It's turning many residents now into part-time photographers. MTN's Kelsey Marison catches up with 2 women lucky enough to see nature in the middle of the Magic City.
It's a common sight in Montana's mountain communities, but not here in Billings. A moose has been spotted running from one block to another, right here in the heart of the city. Came over that hill coming down towards the Zoo Drive exit and saw a big black thing in the field and thought this has got to either be a cow or maybe a bear, but it was so big.
Laura Porter was on her way to the Beartooth Pass Saturday to photograph wildlife. Little did she know she wouldn't have to travel far or even leave Billings. She spotted a large bull moose in a field near Zoo Drive and pulled out her camera to capture the rare sight.
Initially, it was just me and the farmer out there looking at it. And then shortly after that, a lot of people started seeing it and pulling over, and even saw a county sheriff out there. I don't know if he was helping with maybe traffic control or if he was also out there gawking with all the rest of us.
Porter spends her Sundays volunteering at the zoo and always recommends keeping your distance if you come into contact with wildlife. But from a distance, a sighting like this can be fascinating. The moose sightings didn't end Saturday.
I was feeding the ducks this morning. It was early. And all of a sudden, this male moose just came running along here, just stopped for a moment, looked at me, and then trotted on down the way.
Suzanne Erpenbach saw the moose Monday morning outside her home near Rocky Mountain College, along the Big Canal, right in the heart of the city. Suzanne and her husband Larry have lived in this house for almost 20 years and have never seen anything like this.
We see deer, and we've seen raccoons, and we've seen a fox, and we've seen a few other things, but no moose.
A rare sight indeed. Moose are rarely spotted within Billings city limits. The last time one was spotted this far into the city was in 2016. Fish and Wildlife is closed Monday due to the holiday, so Billings police say they are hoping the moose just moves out of town on its own.
It was so beautiful. It was absolutely stunning. And I was just upset because I didn't take a picture. I was just so dumbfounded. I just stood there.
A beautiful sight in perhaps the most unlikely of places. In Billings, Kelsey Marison, MTN News.